So today marks the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands by the Canadian forces, a very important moment in Canadian history, Dutch history, and sort of an interesting point in world history generally, as today, in normal times, which are not these, we should see a parade of former Canadian veterans, which are getting fewer and fewer every year, and it might not happen soon, marching to cheers of a foreign country, an army returning to a foreign country to cheers. There's no other instance like this in history. Today is sort of the perfect day, I think, to talk about Canadian values, because one of the things that Prime Minister Trudeau said in 2015 when he was originally running, was there is no such thing as core Canadian values. There's no such thing as core Canadian values. And this was an absurd statement that rubbed everyone the wrong way. Then he went on to sort of institute the summer jobs program, which tested companies for Canadian values. The only value you had to be for was like abortions all the time. And then the ISNA, which had 3 terrorism funding violations, was currently under terrorism funding violation suspension, had gotten summer jobs funding. So the Canadian values thing under Trudeau has been an absolute cluster F. So I want to do this video because in order to talk about what Canadian values are exhibited 75 years ago today, we need a bit of context. So just on the Netherlands front, then we're going to go even further back into history. 13,000 Canadians lost their lives liberating the Netherlands, and this wasn't something that they had to do, right? They saw the horrors of Nazi Germany, and instead of taking the easy route to Berlin through Belgium, they decided to go through the Netherlands, kick the Nazis out of the Netherlands, to liberate the country, which was currently being under siege, under starvation. The Netherlands was in absolute horrible conditions because the Nazis were on the brink of destruction, so they were basically hoarding all the food and supplies and using them for themselves in the fatherland. So, like, people in the Netherlands were starving to death. There's massive, widespread famine. So those 13,000 did save the lives of countless hundreds of thousands, potentially, by liberating them a couple months earlier. So when people say, oh, soldiers are idiots, not heroes, like, that's a heroic action, risking your lives to save the lives of others. That's standard heroism. And this is a great instance of this. But to talk about what Canadian values are and how they exhibit here, like, I want to go back to the First World War. So there are a couple videos on this channel, because I get a bit passionate about this issue, on the battles of Vimy Ridge and the Battle of Ypres, or the Second Battle of Ypres, where the poem about and the symbolism of the poppy come from. And both of them famous Canadian engagements. So in context, the poppy battle, it was actually the Canadian soldiers were the ones who rushed into the first chemical weapons attack, or wide-scale chemical weapons attack, or the first chemical weapons attack of the First World War, widespread, where they made makeshift gas masks and held the line without reinforcements for 48 hours. And then there was further on. I mean, it's that's your sort of classical display of, individual heroism, let's say, or self-sacrifice. And what we know about the First World War is it is quite brutal. Like, I mean, for however horrific the Second Battle of Ypres was, I mean, the poem becomes famous in Flanders Fields. That's where Flanders is. For the third battle there, which we know as Passchendaele, which was a much more horrific battle the Canadians were involved in, Anzacs first, but then Canadians, because mostly it just rained so much. And then I've talked about Vimy Ridge, and, that video is 20 minutes long, but I think it's worth it. And there's a reason why people call Vimy Ridge the birth of our nation. And I went into the reasons there. And I'll just sort of highlight the main reasons. One, it was the first official engagement where the Canadian forces were under Canadian command. It was like actually the first battle of the Canadian Army, and it was a massive success. They were the first ones to break the trench lines. Now, it was a decoy attack, and the French were supposed to break the lines at the north, but they had just done standard wave tactics. And this is sort of where Canadian values come from. And the fact that Canada is not a European country, where I really detest this, we have European values and I like European Canadians. I really do detest this sort of European Canadianness. And not like I detest like white identity or something, but let me explain. When the Canadians first got to the battlefield of World War I, the Europeans were idiots, let's say, in the battle. One of the best podcasts I've listened to, Hardcore History with Dan Carlin, Blueprint Armageddon. If you have 24 hours to listen to a podcast, the 6-part series on World War I is fantastic. But in 1914 and 1950, when the world first started, and this is the first time they had machine guns and trenches, they would use these European code of conduct, like Like, French officers would wear white gloves and bright red pants, and you would have to march, and it was seen as, like, dishonorable to run at an enemy or something, to lose poise. So all, like, the lieutenants would, like, just march at machine guns and just, they all died. They all, massive casualties. The Europeans would just charge at machine guns in broad daylight with courage and valor, and, like, this is how you do war. Then the Canadians got there, and they realized running at a fortified machine gun position straight up in the middle of daylight is idiotic. This is idiotic. This is standard stupidity. So the Canadians, in order to capture positions, would do night raids. They are the first ones to go out at night and basically say, instead of like thousands of men charging in the broad day, let's take a couple dozen men in the middle of the night. Let's be silent, be stealthy, go into the trenches, capture some positions, destroy some machine gun positions, and then take prisoners and get back out. And these night raids of a few dozen people were way more effective than attacks of tens of thousands of men, and with far fewer casualties. And at the beginning when they were doing this, when the Canadians were doing this, the British, we're a British country, thought it was an idiotic and dishonorable and cowardly thing to do. They hated it. They hated that the Canadians did it. It was dishonorable. We would never do that. Until the Canadians started to get results, and they started to lose all their men. They're like, yeah, maybe we should be doing more of that. Okay. So the greatest example of this is the Canadians actually invented light, fast-moving, machine gun units. So basically, units that sort of fast-moving units that could reposition and fire large amounts of fire, high-volume fire, on the battlefield. That sounds like a good thing, but the British, oh no, that's not how we do things. No. And the reason why these these fast-moving military machine gun units actually got instant into the British Army is King George came to inspect the camps one day. The actual king came, and he said, "Oh, what's this?" And he's like, well, these are sort of machine guns meant to be fast and mobile in the battle units to sort of do this. And they explained it to King George. Like, what a fantastic idea. Well done, lads. So the king praised the British for thinking of it. It was a Canadian invention. Then they were instituted on the battlefield, and turns out they were massively effective. Okay, so this is sort of the example of, like, we were not Europeans by the time 1915 came around. Like, we did not have this European way of thinking. We were people who had sort of built a country on our own frontier, and yes, there was a sort of a British colonial empire type attitude there. But we had, over 100 years or so, we had sort of drifted away from this European thing, and we had our own identity. And you really saw this in the First World War, and this brings us back to Vimy Ridge, where, Arthur Currie, the Canadian general, basically invented combined arms warfare there, sinking the artillery and the infantry, diversifying the infantry into different things, battle tactics. It wasn't just a standard charge, it was a fully complex, realized study battle plan. It's a thing of beauty. And when the Canadians took Vimy Ridge, that was sort of that's what I called the birth of our nation, because it wasn't done in the European way. It was done in a very Canadian way. It was identity was formed. Like, that's the formation of national identity happens around Vimy Ridge. Now, what needs to be said about the First World War, it was a absolutely horrific war. Highest amount of casualties, in Canadian history. Very traumatic. And you could say, where's the glory in the First World War? This is like, are there any good guys? Are there any bad guys? The bad guys are really all the generals. All the generals, I mean, especially the French ones, are really the bad guys, right? Just throwing wave tactics, human wave tactics, careless disregard for human life, thinking that war builds character, not adapting, charging, you could say, where's the valor and honor in that? Okay. But then you have a generation that is sort of traumatized by the First World War of Canadians, who then go and volunteer in 1939 to go fight the Nazis. And the first major Canadian engagement is we sort of get a bit cocky at Dieppe. They kind of figure, oh, we'll just throw the Canadians at the Atlantic Wall. Goes horrible. 50% casualties. One of the worst battles in history, right? Canadians get their sort of redemption story at Juno Beach, where we take the beach. And it is true that the Canadians get so far ahead of the Allied forces, they're actually asked to halt, to not stretch out the lines. So the Canadians, absolutely destroy the Nazis at Normandy. Now, this is all to say you have a country that is sort of gone through its, hey, we were humiliated at Dieppe, we redeemed ourselves at Vimy Ridge, but at Juno Beach, and you have this sort of trauma of the war, like a full understanding of the horrors of war. The officers in the Canadian Army were the ones who were charging in the First World War. So they knew it wasn't like the First World War generals who didn't really have any battle experience, who were just ordering men to their doom. These were men who understood the consequences. So this brings us here to the Netherlands, where you have a country and an army that has seen its amount of trauma, has understood what the risks are, has seen what evil is in the Nazis, and they still choose to take the hard road and go in through the Netherlands instead of through Belgium, which would have been the easy way. So, that's Canadian values, right? That's self-sacrifice. So we need to really have this conversation. God, no, I did not learn this in school. You have to. I mean, if you want Canadian history, you got to learn it for yourself, because you'll never find it in Canadian history. I mean, universities are the worst. So, I mean, this is Canadian values. And the great tragedy of the whole radical left and Justin Trudeau thing is, if we were to properly teach Canadian values, what it is, it doesn't ever exclude, an immigrant family from Nigeria. In fact, the core Canadian values, what our grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought and died for, was the type of value system that didn't sort of judge you from where you were. Like, this was the European thing. That's the European mindset is, oh, you need to be like this, or this sort of caste system. Whereas the Canadian system was valued off meritocracy. I mean, that was Arthur Curry's whole thing, is he's like the great Canadian general, and he was a meritocrat, right? So the Canadian values have always been one of ideas, never skin color, never national, never, European ethnicity, never white ethno-state thing. Canadian values, if taught properly, are something that everyone can be proud of. It's something that you can get an immigrant from the Philippines, Indonesia, Micronesia, all the Asias. They can come in and learn and be proud of and adapt and be part of. That's the beauty of this whole thing. But when we have a prime minister who says, well, there is no core Canadian values. Actually, there is one core Canadian value. It's you must be in favor of abortion all the time. It's like, no, one of our Canadian values is respecting other people's opinions and debate, right? We should be able to have, a core Canadian value is actually being able to tolerate a pro-life argument if you're pro-choice, or tolerating a pro-choice argument if you're pro-life, and allowing both to exist. That's a Canadian value. So that's sort of what I'm going to cross to this is, people don't realize just how special this Netherlands-Canada relationship is, how rare it is. I mean, if you want to see, why are there tulips in Ottawa and Toronto and all over our country in May? Those are donated by the Dutch as thank you for this. Now, it's technically because of the princess that we sheltered, because of the blah, blah. It's not because of a princess. It's really because of the liberation. So, I mean, that's my rant for today, is I would hope everyone sort of comes away with a better understanding of, what Canadian values and history are. And I really encourage you to look it up. And there's not a lot of Canadian history in the Hardcore History, Blueprint to Armageddon, that you kind of have to learn for yourself, but it's a fantastic listen to it. Anyway, but really, I would look up for yourself Canadian First World War history, sort of what it was like going to Europe for these men, and then sort of see what happened in the Second World War, and understand how this nation was formed and the core values that we actually do have. And yes, we might be culturally malleable. We might be able to, and it's because of these core values that we were able to accept, people of different skin colors and nationalities. And it is that fundamental. So this diversity is our strength. I've always hated this because it's a complete inversion of reality. Diversity is meaningless, right? Our strength is our decency. And decency allows us to be diverse in how we look, or ethnic plurality. It is not the ethnic plurality that makes us strong. It is our strength that allows us to function, right, as people who come from different backgrounds. So the blueprint is sort of, if you want to be on the left and you've made it this far, thank you. But just try and understand that this, no Canadian values and Canadianism is racism, blah, blah, blah. That's such not the story of this country. Yes, there are tragedies in our past. Toronto, Ontario was founded by an abolitionist, right? So John Graves Simcoe. The first rule, the Act Against Slavery, city founded 1792, Act Against Slavery, 1793, right? So, try and learn a little bit. I mean, you'll never learn it from the left. You'll never learn it from the right. You'll never learn it from Canadian schools. You have to teach yourself. But just understand, Canadian values are a real thing, and they actually benefit both sides if you look at it with a critical view. So that's what I want to say today. Thank you to all the veterans who are still out there. It is a real tragedy that we don't get to see that parade this year, and hopefully some veterans are still around and able to do it next year, because it is a very special moment in world history that we are about to lose soon. So thanks for listening. Have a good day.